Good evening. Good evening, and thanks for turning out on a warm spring evening. I'm Gary Hilderbrand, the Peter Lewis Hornbeck Professor in Practice and the Chair of the Department of Landscape Architecture. It's my honor to welcome you to the annual Daniel Urban Kiley Lecture given by Bas Smets, who is currently the John Portman Design Critic in Landscape Architecture this semester. I want to begin by acknowledging that the Harvard Graduate School of Design is located on the traditional and ancestral land of the Massachusetts, the original inhabitants of what is now known as Boston and Cambridge. We pay respect to the people of the Massachusetts tribe, past, present, and future, and honor the land itself, which remains sacred to the Massachusetts. The school also recognizes the work of the Harvard University Native American program in cultivating the relationships that led to the creation of this acknowledgement. Quick reminder about live captioning. We have that available tonight for our virtual audience. And for those of you who like to take pictures of quotes here in the room, if you're online, you can click closed captioning at the bottom of the live stream window. I want to give thanks to Kat and Paige and Matt and the entire event staff. And I also want to invite you to join us for an upcoming GSD program. On Tuesday, March 28th at 6:30, please join us for the annual John T. Dunlop Lecture, which will be delivered by architect Andrew Bernheimer. This evening's lecture honors Daniel Urban Kiley, who enrolled in the GSD in 1935, didn't finish, and became one of the world's most respected and influential landscape architects. An anonymous donor established the Kiley Lecture in 1984, and ever since it's been an important event in our department's public programs. Kiley's importance to the field is evident throughout this school. The Kiley Archive is part of the Loeb Library Special Collections. The Kiley Exhibition Fund was created by friends, clients, and protégés to support landscape architecture exhibitions. And the Kiley Teaching Fellow Program supports faculty recruitment and development. Recently, our library received the late Aaron Kiley, that's Dan's son, his vast collection of photographs of his father's work. So we're honored to have these enduring tributes to Dan and the Kiley family as part of the GSD. Now, it's quite special to have Bas Smets give the Kiley Lecture because I'm pretty sure Kiley was an influence. There's another reason why this is particularly special tonight. Tonight, it's my distinct honor to announce publicly that on behalf of our Dean, Sarah Whiting, who's here, and my colleagues in the Faculty of Design, that Bas Smets has been appointed Professor in Practice of Landscape Architecture at GSD. So with due thanks and praise, we welcome Bas Smets to the senior faculty of the Graduate School of Design. Stay there, stay there, I'm not there. I thought you were getting away easy. It's really a great honor to make that announcement. Of the leading landscape architects practicing today, Bas Smets might be the one who has most seriously faced up to climatic adaptation and resilience in cities through the works of his firm, Bureau Bas Smets. This makes his lecture tonight and his faculty appointment in the school especially relevant for us, and I'm sure you'll hear about this in his talk this evening. Bas Smets brings to the GSD a radically aware and urgent sensibility around the adaptation of urban environments towards improved public health futures. He does this through the inventive use of primary tools of landscape architecture while collaborating with a broad array of experts in evidence-based modes of conceiving and building. Bas has spoken about his appointment in the school as a means to pursue topics and investigations and design discourses that his commissions may not always provide. Bas has a background in landscape architecture, civil engineering, and architecture. He founded Bureau Bas Smets in Brussels in 2007 and has completed more than 50 projects in more than 12 countries, including the United States, with his team of 25 architects and landscape architects. His realized projects include the recent Parc des Ateliers in Arles with Annabelle Seldorf and Frank Gehry, the Park of Thurn and Taxis in Brussels, the Mandrake Hotel in London, and the Hirama waterfront in Albania. Each of these projects is part of an interrelated research into the experience of the city in part as an assemblage of altered networks of microclimatic conditions. Urbanization and building alter climate, something that was first observed in London in the early 19th century and is by now aware to pretty much everybody on the planet. He describes this approach as inventing augmented landscapes by utilizing logics found in nature to achieve adaptations in microclimates and new atmospheres in the places where he works. Collaboration with artists and scientists take a central role, and new regimes of urban vegetation combine the absorption of carbon with the production of evaporative cooling. The resulting urban landscape demonstrates a reciprocity between the altered meteorology and spatial world above the ground with the life support that's necessary below. In 2022, the entire design world took notice as Bas won the design competition of the decade, the adaptation of the Ile de la Cité after the catastrophic fire of 2019 at the Cathedral of Notre Dame. He'll talk about this tonight, I'm sure, because it's the kind of commission that changes your life. The first thing is you move from Brussels to Paris 5 days a week. In the work in Paris, as you'll see, there's an unbending commitment to landscape performance. Again, the reciprocity between what's above and what's below the ground. But my own interest in this work, and in so many others of his commissions, is that while performance is as high as it can be, spatial and experiential qualities never diminish. They gain, in fact. The work is as spatially sophisticated as it is performative. And the world I want to live in never privileges one of these over the other. I think the incisive and inventive power in this can be traced back a bit to Bas's formation as a young designer. During his time working in Paris with Michel Devine, Bas completed his Master of Landscape Architecture at the University of Geneva. 4 days a week in Paris, 3 days in Geneva. At the university, he had an amazing group of teachers. He learned the precision of marking the landscape simply but profoundly from the amazing Georges Decombe. He engaged the deep culture of landscape theory and environmental thought from Sébastien Marot. And he inherited the discerning metaphysical conceptualization of the landscape from perhaps the greatest French landscape architect of his time, Michel Courgeot. This was a rarefied ensemble of critics who drilled Bas for rigor and imagination, and more than one of them has declared Bas to be one-of-a-kind student and a singularly gifted designer. We're very pleased to welcome you here, Bas. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this beautiful and kind introduction. It's a real pleasure and a true honor to be here, especially for the Dan Kiley lecturer, who is indeed a big influence in my work. Actually, it's an honor to be back here, because exactly 10 years ago I was standing here for the first time giving a lecture. Turn on my computer. Ten years ago, a lot has changed. I have changed, but the world has changed. And just Tuesday, the IPCC published their 6th report. I don't know if you've read it. You've probably seen this image, published all around the world. But the beautiful colors conceal the terrible reality behind this. And I've read the report, not the whole report, but at least a summary. And it's not a joyful reading. I'll give you one phrase. There is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. and note what's behind brackets, very high confidence. I'll give you another phrase a bit further. The choices and actions implemented in this decade will have impacts now and for thousands of years. High confidence. What to do with that? It's a question that's been on my mind for a long time. And when the opportunity came to apply to become professor in practice, I responded with exactly what in mind what Gary said so eloquently, to find the brightest minds, to find the best institutions, to come up with solutions, to experiment, to at least try finding an answer to this climate change that is coming so rapidly. And this morning, I thought I'd come to the right place, because even at Harvard Square, the writing is on the wall: plant a tree or die. The name of my design studio is the same, or the title is the same as this lecture, Biospheric Urbanism. But first things first. This is a very beautiful image drawn by Alexander von Humboldt together with Aimé Bonpland. After having explored the Americas about 230 years ago, he goes back to Europe and he tries to make a new type of expression, a new type of drawing that combines all the elements that he has seen. And what is particularly interesting is that he notes all his measurements from altitude to temperature to humidity, even the blueness of the sky, and he tries to understand how things work. This is an image of the Chimborazo volcano in Ecuador, but he would also make sketches, and I really love these sketches where you see that through design, through drawing, he tries to understand a physical reality. We call this a designerly way of thinking. And you can feel that even the hesitant brushstroke is a way of understanding reality. And that's, I think, the biggest inspiration in my work. And of course, Alexander von Humboldt would explore a natural environment. Well, we're asked to work in a highly artificial environment. We mostly work in cities or urban environments, highly artificial, highly made by man. And we've been lucky to work in Europe, but also all around the globe, every time trying to understand the built reality as a new type of nature, trying to understand built reality as a microclimate, an artificial microclimate for which we have to find a new way of implementing the natural world. And I will show this on a little trip of 6 projects. We'll start in London, we'll go to Paris. From Paris we'll go to Himara, then we'll go to Bahrain, then we go to Arles, and then we end in Paris. Because as Gary said, everything starts and ends in Paris. But first, London. London was a project, a very small project, 4 by 8 meters, so exactly the stage here in front of you, where in 2010, a client asked me to transform the damp and gloomy mineral courtyard into a lush garden. Now, this courtyard was surrounded on 3 sides by very high facades. And I had the feeling that something was happening there. There was no wind, there was no sun, some kind of strange microclimate. And I asked the construction company that was renovating the facades to take temperature both on the street and in the courtyard. And we noticed a 3 to 4 degree temperature difference, always a bit higher within the courtyard. This is due to the fact that there's no wind, but it's also due to the fact that it's a building that's protected by English heritage, and there's a certain heat loss through the window frames. So I thought if it doesn't freeze, we can go to a whole different type of climate. And we investigated even further this microclimate of this courtyard, and we understood it's very close to a subtropical situation underneath the high trees. So basically the understory of a subtropical forest. And so we thought, if it's a subtropical forest in London, can it not be seen as the last piece of London untouched, a kind of prehistorical project? So we looked for tree ferns, originally from New Zealand, We looked for the quarry that provided the pavement of the sidewalks in that part of London. We chose some big rocks. We hired the largest movable crane of the UK and brought 3-ton stones into this little courtyard. I climbed up the crane myself to take this picture, flying tree ferns above London. We planted them ourselves with my team. And we created this understory underneath the tree ferns. The client put a beautiful Francoise that creates a magnificent dialogue with these ferns. You see the canopy. And in our climatic research, we understood that the only thing that was lacking in London was the right humidity, which seems odd, not humid enough. So we installed a misting system, and every hour there's 1 minute of mist, and since there's no wind, it stays there. And so from this gloomy situation, we try to reveal its microclimatic condition with the choice of plants and with the added humidity. 13 years ago, and last year we made the cover of AD with this picture taken by François Allard. And you see Francoise is covered with the canopy of the tree ferns. So here we had to respond to a climatic condition. Second project, Paris La Défense. You know the arch. This is Dan Kiley's project that Michel de Vigne is renovating. And we were asked by a developer to come up with a project for this area. This area is actually an urban boulevard on which this developer had found a way of implanting 1,000 micro foundations to cover it with 4,000 square meters of bridge structure on which he built a new skyscraper. Totally above ground on a bridge structure in between all the skyscrapers. I thought, what kind of landscape should we make? What kind of landscape is this? And the closest I could imagine it to be is this. The glass facades as glaciers, the mineral plazas as rocks. And I thought the only thing that's missing is a tree line. And a tree line, if you walk in the Alps or any mountain, it's a very important feeling. I mean, when you're in the cover of the trees, you're protected from the sun, from the wind. The moment you go out to reach the top, you know you've left the tree line. And so we thought, can we not create this tree line within La Défense? And even imagine the staircases as avalanches. So we thought, how can we be 100% mineral and 100% green? And so this bridge structure we imagined as a rock flowing down all the way to the lower level of Courbevoie. And we took the plan of this bridge structure as our new starting point. So we thought if we want to plant everywhere, we have to see where we cannot plant. We cannot plant on the beams. We cannot plant on the fire truck axis. We cannot plant on the ADA axis. And so we made this plan just like a natural condition, but it's an artificial one, of non-plantable zones and planted everywhere else. And the developer had asked me to plant at least 9 trees, because that was his deal with the city. We planted 50. And of course, you can imagine a whole discussion with the structural engineer to find volume for structural soil. Now, I'm an engineer myself, which helped us come up with this scheme and to push them to have 53 centimeters, so a bit less than 2 feet, of continuous soil. Of course, 53 centimeters, not more than a seat, is not a lot. But if you apply it on 4,000 square meters, you have 2,000 cubic meters. And what counts in the end for a tree is volume, not depth. And so we designed this system ourselves. 2 years of negotiation with the structural engineer, you can imagine, where the soil is continuous, where we made these metal cages that are, of course, you cannot go through the waterproofing, so they're attached to these concrete blocks that support these beams. And on the beams are laid the natural stone granite slabs of 1.5 meter by 50 centimeters with open joints, so all the rainwater goes 100% to the soil that is continuous on these 4,000 square meters. And so in the end, it gives you a very mineral feel, as if you're in the mountains, but with a lot of trees poking through and with this open joints. And so we did a whole work to get rid of all the details. You don't see any gutters, you don't see any traps. Everything is hidden, so you only see stone and trees and one single bench. We've planted the trees in 2018, and we've prepared them in the nursery to have flat root balls with a certain height. And so give it 2-3 more years, and we will have the continuous canopy right here at the entrance of La Défense. I go more south to Albania. Here at the southern coast of Albania, in front of Corfu, Atelier Albania organized a competition in 2014 where we were asked to rethink the waterfront. And it was interesting to see that this waterfront that they liked so much was completely cut off the Mediterranean by this 2-meter high seawall. It's about 7 feet high. You only had a couple of staircases hidden in these nooks. And so you couldn't see the Mediterranean from the waterfront, the restaurants, the hotels. And they had made a parking lot on top of it, and then they planted these ridiculous olive trees in these planters. So we thought, okay, let's redo this. Let's rethink the coastal pine forest that the southern Albanian coast is known for. Let's imagine how to get rid of the seawall and transform it in a number of platforms. We worked with a maritime engineer who told us that, of course, this system absorbs the shock of the waves much better than a vertical wall. And then once we're outside of the seawater, we planted maritime pine trees. This simple section, we deployed over 350 meters of waterfront. We studied the break of the waves to find the right curve to our new platforms. And then we applied, so you can see this is the former seawall. And we applied the section to come up with this project. We studied the color of the sand to have the same concrete. And so when the sand flows over the concrete, it becomes one. And so you feel it from the terraces now. There's one continuous walk towards the water. The trees have grown, as you can see here, and they create this linear pine forest along the coast and provide shade when you come out of the water and you want to get dry, or you're walking around with your kids. And here you see how the sand flows over the platforms. At the same time, the trees create a new foreground, pushing the buildings to the background. And from far away, you see how this very simple intervention, one single section, totally transforms the way the space is used. And since it has been realized that many of the hotels and the restaurants got an upgrade, improved, and tourism has thrived since. From Albania, I go even more south to the Persian Gulf, Bahrain, with the historical city center of Muharraq, which in the 50s had this Venetian type quality with warehouses half on the peninsula and half in the water. And its activity came from pearling, meaning boats going out into the water, catching oysters, coming back, opening them, and looking for a pearl. This stopped with the Japanese inventing a synthetic way to produce the pearls. But so I thought this picture was really, really beautiful. Pearling stopped, a freeway was built, and the peninsula lost its connection to the water. But what remained in the dense fabric of Muharraq are some beautiful buildings. This is a mosque linked to the pearling, from the captain's house to the place where the women would open the oysters. And the Ministry of Culture of Bahrain enlisted 17 of those buildings on UNESCO World Heritage, and then launched a competition to make a pathway linking these 17 buildings one with another. And we teamed up with Kerstin Geers, David van Zeveren, my Belgian compatriots, to imagine this pathway. Except that we thought it's a bit strange, because they even gave us the line with which to connect the buildings. And I thought it's a bit strange that we're materializing a line that doesn't mean anything except that it's connecting buildings that by accident survived time. It's a bit like this kids game where you combine numbers and it's an elephant or a giraffe. So I thought it's a bit absurd. And when we walked the site, we noticed that there was plenty of empty lots. All these blue squares are empty lots where most of the buildings were made in Adobe. They had collapsed, and we asked the Minister of Culture, like, what's the plan? What will you do with the empty lots? And they said, well, we'll build a new building. And we said, why? Like, because it was like that. And we thought maybe it's an opportunity, and the name stuck. So we thought maybe it's an opportunity to make public space. Maybe it's an opportunity to imagine a kind of new inner public space that in a sense compensates for the loss of the connection with the water. So no more outward look, but an inner look. And so we defined by accident or by coincidence 17 public plazas for 17 buildings on the UNESCO list. And we said this walk, this 3.5 kilometer walk, this 2-hour walk, where you go from one building to the other, is punctuated by these moments of oasis, these moments of climatic experiences of these 17 plazas. To link them, we didn't want to draw a line on the floor. And I just come back from the Alps, and I love the way how in the Alps you know your way because people put these little heaps of stones. So we thought, can we not use urban furniture to mark the way? And we decided to design a lamppost, just like Hansel and Gretel, that brings you from one plaza to the other. So here, for example, was an empty lot. And as you can see, the name stuck, opportunity number 7. We reenacted the volume of the building with trees and then added a program in function of the context in which we were, next to a school, playground, a bench, a water element. Very basic and always the same modules that we use, designed again with Dav and Kerstin. We designed 17 of them. This is the house I showed you before. So a carpet cut out of the fabric with the trees creating the volume. All the concrete with pearls in it, the oyster shells, to give it a kind of a cool atmosphere, like no desaturated. Benches. This is in the beginning. The trees have grown since, and these are recent pictures taken by Bas Smets, where you can see how we create shade, and in the shade people stop during their work to send a text. 17 climatic plazas. And we put a lot of thought in the design of it, because we didn't want it to be European. We didn't want to import European design to Bahrain, but we didn't want it to be Arabic either. So we wanted it to be a kind of non-design expressing the climatic change made by this plaza. So again, the desaturation of the concrete, but also the light. It's a cool light, while all of the lights are a bit yellowish. So it's really trying to show in a kind of intuitive way to us human animals, this is a cool place, you can come here. From Bahrain back up to Arles, in the south of France. This is the Parc des Ateliers, which was an abandoned industrial wasteland, where in 1848 the French engineers had carved out a horizontal platform out of the bedrock. They had put these industrial buildings on top of them to repair locomotives. This activity stopped, and the site was used for the Rencontre de Arles, a annual photography exhibition. Until Maya Hoffman, the founder of the Luma Foundation, decided to make a new site for the production and the exhibition of arts, and commissioned Annabel Zeldorf to renovate the industrial buildings. Frank Gehry, to make a new central building and asked me to transform this arid plateau into, again, a lush garden. And I remember walking there with Maya Hoffman as early as 2009, and I thought, wow, a garden here. Why here? It's a platform carved out of the bedrock, so there's no earth, there's no water, there's no plants. We again did our climatic study together with Transolar. We found out that since this platform is absorbing the heat, you would have a perceived temperature of about 50 degrees in summer, caught between the solar energy above you and the radiation below you. And people that visited the venues, they knew if you would walk from one building to the other, you almost had to run, because you would have such a headache from the solar exposure. And so we thought, what would nature do? What would nature do knowing that Arles is surrounded by three geomorphic regions, the Alpi, the southern branch of the Alps, the Crau, the former floodbed of a glacier, and the Camargue, the estuary plain of the Rhone and the Mediterranean. So in a sense, all the logics of plants, from the humidity of the Camargue to the mineral stony area of the Alpi, all of it was there. So we thought, what would nature do? What would happen in, let's say, 200, 300, 400 years? Because the theory is that any site left abandoned in 400 years' time goes to its climax. So we thought, and we had the wind studies from the Gehry building, which you can see here. So we thought wind, the strong mistral wind, would bring sediments. Sediments would create topography. Topography would create different environments. Different environments would create different types of plants. So we together with Transolar, together with ecologists, pedologists, hydrologists, we imagined we pushed this hypothesis. We dug out a lake, imagining that the wind would fall down after the hitting the Gehry building. We modeled the terrain through the wind, and then a bit by a coincidence, we found out that this created a very interesting asymmetrical climatic section, because in summer you would lay on the soft slope in the wind, which is refreshing, but in the shade of the trees, while in the winter you would walk in the sun, protected from the wind by the trees. So a kind of asymmetrical section that we deployed on the side. And then a second interesting discovery is that with more earth, we go further in ecological succession, which means that if you walk on the side and next to you the earth is going up, you go faster into the future, because this would take 200 years, and these pine trees would only come 200 years from now. So in a sense, we change the space-time relationship on the site. The water is pumped from an adjacent canal, and this shows you the collective intelligence needed to make this microclimatic section that now produces a new microclimate on site. Again, here we worked with Transolar, working with the UTCI, Universal Thermal Climate Index, looking at the existing situation here to the new situation now. 80,000 plants, 3,500 square meters of water, and you see the evaporation, you see the climate machine in action. And this lowers the temperature from 50 degrees in summer and only 13% of comfortable time to 65% comfortable time, 25, 30 degrees. And if there's a wind, of course, we're speaking UTCI, we're speaking perceived temperature. If there's a little wind, it lowers the temperature even more, and we get to almost 80% comfortable time, which you see in summer now, because where before people would run over this platform from the Forges to the Grande Halle, today people come with their kids to play in summer. So I'll show you a before and an after. And I'll do it again. Before Google Earth, after. 80,000 plants, both from the Alpi, for those who recognize pine trees, both from the Camargue, for those who recognize willows, and in between an artwork by Karsten Holler that mirrors and that creates a kind of fragmented collection of these landscapes. Here you see the mist from the lake and the tower of Frangari. Here again, this evaporation machine, that's what it is in the end, creating this microclimate. Here again, every plant you see is planted, 80,000, 140 different species. This is Karsten Haller creating this kind of hybrid landscape from the Camargue to the LP. And with Philippe Arnaud, we worked on the entrance, creating this dark garden. For those who had been here 10 years ago, I showed you the CHZ movie that we had made together with Philippe Arnaud. Since we planted 140 species, we thought this is also a botanical garden, so we made this botanical tags so that schools can come and see the richness of their own region. So in summer now, it's widely used. This is a performance space. We made a special lawn with that is used for soccer fields. So this summer they put up a podium in the pond, and 3,000 people could watch a music performance. A drone view from Iwan Baan, showing how the wasteland has become now the biggest park of the region of Arles. And from the beginning, there was a lot of talk with the core group around Maya about how many people would come to the park. And I remember I told her from the beginning, we will measure the success of the park by the number of migratory birds that would come to the park. And so with the Tour du Vala, the scientific center that her father had started in the Camargue, we do a yearly how do you say that? Counting of the birds. And after the first year, we counted already 36 new species. So now we put up new birds' nests. So I think I want to push it to 50, making almost a kind of hyper nature. It's almost more natural than the sites around it. So 36 new species. And what's interesting, and maybe what's a bit hopeful, because I started quite gloomy with my citations of IPCC, but when you make a vegetal landscape, when you bring plants, animal life comes back. Birds come back. They know the pond is full with frogs. The earth is full with worms. You can reenact. You can bring life back to a site. And I would end with Paris. This is Paris. This is Notre Dame. Notre Dame de Paris, lying on the Île de la Cité. And Victor Hugo wrote, the Île de la Cité is like the cradle of Paris. And when we started this competition, and we're team leader of a big team of 8 officers, together with Grau, architects, NGA, and Jarop. When we started this competition, we looked at Île de la Cité and how it changed over time. And we thought it was interesting that Notre Dame becomes a kind of privileged witness of a city looking for its form, of an island that changes, of an urbanism that changes. And so we thought, if Notre Dame is this privileged witness, what's the next step? What's the 21st century? And we thought, and we measured the importance of what we were doing. If we rethink all the surroundings of Notre Dame, we rethink the city. Since the city was made on the Île de la Cité, since the Roman first Carus Maximus was made right here. So looking at what was there, we were surprised to see that all the typical typologies of Paris were present around the cathedral, but in a fragmented way. So you would have the squares, you would have the Berge de Seine, you would have the Parvis, you would have the Alignement, you would have all this, let's say, these forms that make up Paris, that creates its homogeneity, that creates its quality, all there but fragmented. First observation. Second observation, the climate of Paris tomorrow is that of Sevilla. Sevilla is made to deal with those high temperatures. Paris is not. And the city of Paris, I think in Europe, is one of the most progressive cities thinking about climate. They have issued many reports that we, of course, used. And so we thought, if we rethink the surroundings of Notre Dame, how can we rethink them from a climatic point of view? First, some more observations. The religious axis of the cathedral from west to east points to the sunrise, of course, but it also points to the source of the Seine. So a very important axis from west to east. That is doubled to the north by the facades of Haussmann and to the south by the Seine itself. And then the last important observation, the parvis, the plaza in front of Notre Dame as made bigger by Haussmann, has exactly the same dimensions as the cathedral itself, but also the same dimensions as the eastern part. So we said it's kind of trinity. There's a kind of trinity of spaces in front and behind the cathedral, which is interesting because symbolically the west has always been the humane, the mundane, the human activities, while the east, the sunrise, has always been the beyond. So we thought, how can we play with that axis, with this triple space? And the first maybe drawing that tried to anchor these ideas is this schematic drawing, but it brings back the geography of the site. It brings back the trinity or the trinitary space of the cathedral. Brings back the connection with the Seine as an important connection. And then from a very precise reading of the existing, we really measured every tree, its canopy, its height. We thought, can we give a clear form to this plaza, which now has this planters here, some stairs there, the entrance to the Roman archaeology right here. It's a bit fragmented, so we thought we give it a very simple, clear design, as wide and as long as a cathedral, and even the same orientation of the pavement. This space here in between the Préfecture de Police and the cathedral, we give it some more trees, so we create a bit more space towards the police building. And in the back, where today there's many fences, there's two squares, two gardens. We make one single garden, and we recreate the connection between the back side, the eastern side of the cathedral, to the Seine. Very important access, creating a new lawn here, and inviting a visitor to walk around the church, as if you walk around a sculpture. The trees in this street are continued to block the winds, because this is where groups would stand or wait to go into the tower. Right now there's a Venturi effect of a cold wind, so we block those winds. And then we create, along the Seine, a 400-meter long park that goes all the way to the amazing memorial that Pinguesson had designed for the Mémorial de la Déportation. And so, using the typologies of the site, the typologies of Paris, but rethinking them from a climatic point of view and from a collective point of view to insert new uses, both the visitors and the Parisians will be invited to walk around Notre Dame and to discover these beautiful lawns right next to the Seine. It's one of the only places in Paris where you can lie on a lawn next to the river. So rethinking those 5 typologies, and then together with the architects Grau, rethinking the parking lot that is not used anymore as a visitor center. And I'll walk you through the design in a number of images. So as you can see here, this plaza, we've conceived it as a clearing. We add trees on all sides. The plaza becomes a clearing, and the clearing is quite fitting for a cathedral that is called a forest of stone. The pillars are like a forest. We made a clearing in front of it, but around it you can sit in the shade and enjoy the view on Notre Dame. We keep openings over the left bank, and here, for example, you see the Pantheon. And then we worked on this former parking lot. Here you see a beautiful image. Here you see Notre Dame. Before -1 floor was made, this -2. You had this kind of imposing colonnade. And so the architects decided to take out level -1. We positioned the entrance on Notre Dame. And here you have a typical 19th century reading of the cathedral. We'd call it descendant. You read it from the top to the bottom. If you walk through the central passage here, you have the new entrance to the archaeology. You have an opening to the Seine. But especially we positioned the stairs on the location where the houses stood before, which means that you're obliged to see the cathedral as it was built, ascendant, from the bottom to the top. Why? Because of course, they want you to look at the sky, at heaven. So first the porticos, then the gallery of the kings, and the rosaces, and then the towers. And so the positioning obliges you to rediscover how the cathedral was meant to be read by its architects. This is the opening towards the Seine to get the light into the visitor center. Here you see the trees that we add. It's a difficult exercise by adding trees and keeping protected views on the cathedral, as you can see here. So the perspective creates the clearing, while in reality there are openings. Here you see these lawns along the Seine, and an amazing moment here where you're next to the south facade of the Notre Dame, having a view on Pantheon next to the water. Here you see this new connection, the tainted glass, the flying buttresses. I mean, this facade is as important to me as the one on the west. But most of the tourists, 12 million of them, only look at the western facade. So we really hope they will discover all of Notre Dame through this intervention. A climatic project, more trees, more shade, more evapotranspiration. The only problem was the plaza. We were not allowed to plant trees because underneath is the Roman crypt, so there's no space and no load capacities. And furthermore, more than 270 events are programmed on this space. So we came up with this idea. This is my daughter showing you how it works. There's a thin layer of water that comes out of this bench, and that runs down all the way to the cathedral, creating the effect of an orage d'été, what do you call it, the summer rain. After the summer rain, the air is cool. It's not that the floor is cool, it's the air itself that's cool because of a chemical reaction, evaporation, that lowers temperature. So this can be activated whenever we want to. It will create this kind of ephemeral reflections of the cathedral, which I'm sure people will try to capture, and I hope kids will run in front of it. And when we presented this, one of the clergy told me that, Mr. Smets, you are proposing us to walk on water? I didn't respond to that. We capture rainwater on the plaza, we store it in the former parking lot, and then activate it whenever we want. And it's actually based on a very Parisian way of cleaning the streets. You must have seen at 6 in the morning, they open the vans. They have a special réseau d'eau non potable, a network of non-drinkable water. And so basically we're using their own system to lower the temperature. We worked with Frank Boutet on this project, imagining UTCI, air temperature, surface temperature, and really imagining all the interventions as a kind of constellations of microclimates that has the capacity, and this you see in blue, of lowering the perceived temperature when it's built, but especially going towards 2050, where the warming will be much more felt in a density as Paris. And so with the proposal, the Ile de la Cité becomes a kind of Ile de Fraîcheur, or we try to imagine how, from its cradle, from the epicenter where Paris was built, we can imagine to change our cities. And I want to end with a very short animation that we've made. And that refers to the title of the lecture, Biospheric Urbanism to rethink the urbanism, the place where we live, as an interface between a meteorology that is uncertain and a geology that is not very well known. And to imagine, like the image of a tree, how we can both anchor our cities into its soil and harvest both the sunlight and the rain coming from above. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bas, for the presentation and really for the work. I think if you told me 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago when you lectured here last, that your projects would effectively come out of the modeling of climate, that the spatial form, that the surface conditions would truly be in cross-section, like the model of climate, I would probably not have believed it. But I'd like to know about the software, the work with Transsolar, and how that can be so generative, and how you can have almost a visual replication of the model in landscape vocabulary.
The software doesn't produce the drawing, though. The software helps us verify what we propose, and the software guides us in the design, but it doesn't produce a design. So it's not it's not that's very important. It's not the software producing design.
So it's a translation.
Yeah, and it's a verification. So we make the design, send it to Transsolar, they come back, and then we adapt. So it's I see it more as an architect would send his plans to a structural engineer. There's a kind of feedback, but we decide, and so it's not a direct translation.
I had the chance last summer to see the exhibition of the 4 finalist competition entries. I think it was 9 months of work, right? And it was really quite something in the Arsenal to see these 4 panoramas of just a huge amount of thinking around the memorialization, I guess you would say, of the cathedral itself, especially in this new circumstance of its tragic fire. There was only one project that was driven by climate. And it's curious to me. Sometimes in competitions, you sort of have an angle because you know who the audience is, and you might know who has the strongest vote. And in the case of Mary Dalgo, one would expect that something really driven by climate, and therefore driven by the future well-being of the population and the visitors, would appeal to the mayor. But it's surprising to me that the other schemes really don't mention, to any real degree, the alteration of microclimates. So I think in this way, one could say that that work is singular, and it wasn't a gimmick and it wasn't an angle, because you've proven that it is really a way of working.
I must say, I never thought I could win the competition. So I thought,
because you weren't Parisian.
No, but in the end, they were less concerned by nationality than I thought. But I thought, I've already lost, so I can only win. So we thought, with the whole team, we thought, let's make the best project we can make. Maybe there'll be an exhibition, and in a sense, we were very liberated, because we thought, okay, since we cannot win, let's just go. Like no compromise, just the best, cleanest, most right answer that we could come up with. But we were so convinced of what we did that we thought that everybody would have done the same. Sometimes in a competition you think that they're all going to do the same, and so I thought we're going to do the same, and then the French are going to win. But that was my fear, And when I saw the other projects, like, wow, as you said, I was very surprised.
There were lots of trees in every scheme, but there was none of the other schemes had the same kind of reasoning. same kind of deeper motivation for the use of trees. Now I want to ask you, did you get pushback once you were permeated and you begin negotiations? I know there was a long struggle to get an agreement, and then you get back to design. Was there pushback on this many trees on the Île de la Cité?
No, not at all. On the contrary, the mayor has decided not one tree can be cut down, which is also a problem, because I mean we need to dig, we need to change levels once in a while. No, they're very serious about. They know why they chose us, and they keep us on track, and it's a fast track, because we're supposed to start building after the Olympics, so in end of 2024, beginning 2025. No, it's a real commitment from the city, and it's rare to have that climatic commitment nowadays.
But as your opening statements proved, it can no longer be rare, right? Let's have some questions from the audience. We have microphones on both sides. Sarah?
I'll give you mine.
I'll have to give it right back to you. No, I mean, that was a fantastic talk. The projects are all, you feel immediately enveloped in the atmosphere as well as the aesthetics of them, even as you describe them and show them to us. So very successful, even as a lecturer, you brought us to all of them. I was surprised by your use of the term non-design for the Bahrain project, and I wondered whether you would use that term for all of your projects, because in a way there's a kind of naturalized, no pun intended, way of working that you have, of working through the climatic logic and producing something that doesn't actually scream its story. But it does seem like non-design is part of, you create spaces that don't feel like they've always been there, or they feel logical, as you described the Paris project, that everyone would have done it. And so I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on the term non-design and whether it would be something that you would apply to the projects that aren't in that particular location.
That's a very good question. The non-apparent design. So especially in the Bahrain, and we discussed it at length with Kersten and David, it cannot be European, it cannot be Arabic. What is it? So we came up with this kind of meccano. All the pavers are the same, all the lamps are the same, all the water elements are the same. The benches are made out of 5 modules, one straight, one curved. So we made this kind of Lego with which we could make these 17 plazas, and so they would refer to one another rather than to something else. So of course it's highly designed. I mean it's over designed to to not look like it's designed. And the same in the La Défense project. It looks, when you're there, it looks like there's no detail, but of course it takes not only design but also many meetings to get rid of all the things you don't want in your plan. But the thing is, what I'm looking for, and the Paris one is a good, the Trinity one is a good one. Therefore, is I try to read artificial constraints as if they were natural constraints. So I'm always thinking, what would nature do? Nature is super opportunistic. I mean, that's luckily, I mean, it's a force. So nature wants to grow wherever it can. So we try to mimic that process. So we think more in terms of process than composition, because things change all the time. And also, process allows you to change within the project, because between your idea now and construction in 3 years' time, things will change. I mean, and there will be surprises, and they're mostly not good. And so you have to come up with something that is a bit flexible. So we cannot make alignments anymore, because 2 out of 3 trees will not be able to plant them there, because there's stuff in the ground that you don't know about. So in that sense, I would say of course it's a design, but it's not a composition. It's trying to give form to a process.
Question up in the back there.
Hi, thank you. I really enjoyed seeing those projects. Very nice. So my question is, I heard the word temperature quite a bit. I mean, this seems clearly important as we're talking about climate change, but a little bit less climate. And I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit about how you see temperature and how you see climate, because climate, I would think, is a lot more complex and one that's, of course, a lot more difficult to model. So, yeah, any thoughts on that?
When I say temperature, I always mean perceived temperature. So what we can play with is perceived temperature, which is the temperature your body feels, and that's a mix of the temperature of the air, what we call temperature, but also radiation, also humidity, also velocity, the clothes you wear, the activity you do. And that's this UTCI, this Universal Thermal Climate Index, is nothing else than a number that you give to the temperature that you feel as a body. And for example, in Arles, we don't lower the air temperature that much, but we lower the perceived temperature by 20 degrees because we create humidity, because the wind that before was warmed by the platform and was unpleasant is now cooled by the pond and is pleasant. And so the idea is that you can make little bulbs of microclimates to deal with the big climate, because you can, I mean, changing the big climate is gonna, well, that's the product is not going to change the climate, but it produces a microclimate, and it's our naive hope, and it's very naive. But if every city becomes an urban ecology that produces microclimates, we can have a planetary effect. It's not going to solve everything, but I think we will need many solutions. I mean, we don't have the time to wait for the big idea. You know, we need to do many small things all together right now. I wrote an article in the French newspaper La Libération. I called it "Chaque feuille compte," every leaf counts, and it's a bit easy, but at the same time, people need to understand that every leaf is carbon dioxide transformed into organic material that creates a lowering of the temperature. Every leaf does that.
My faculty hears me say this a lot, but if we wait for the mitigation to work, we'll all fry. Right? Or we'll drown, or we'll be
Choose your catastrophe.
Yeah. More questions? Oh. Ed?
Yeah, thank you, Bas. That was so inspiring. And I like the title of that article you just mentioned. We talked to the students today about Derrida's essay, Chaque fois la fin du monde. And, you know, we're always kind of recovering and kind of exposing ourselves to this finitude. But a specific comment about Notre Dame, which had never occurred to me until this iteration, is you doubled the cathedral on one side, but it never occurred to me that across the plaza is the Hôtel Dieu, which in Parisian architecture might have been the first building to fully and comprehensively think through the circulation of air and the contribution of a building to the sustaining of life, and particularly in a building that was devoted to making the world hospitable, in a sense. So it was very touching to me to see the Parvis redeployed, not only in respect to the cathedral and the Seine, but also to the Hôtel Dieu, and kind of learning those lessons between architecture and landscape architecture. It's really quite beautiful.
But it's really a special place. It's really an island of justice. Justice of the police, justice of the law, justice of the doctors, that also given a kind of a justice to your problem, and justice of God. So it's and then you have the memorial. I mean, the more you get into it, you're like, wow, it's really, and that's then the cradle of Paris. And then on one side you have the very lively university neighborhood of Saint-Michel. The other side you have the Bastille. So you have very lively neighborhoods, and then in the middle, this kind of very important moment. Oh.
Bas, thank you. I have a question regarding process, regarding, let's say, this climatic analysis, climatic knowledge. Is definitely you are committed with that, but you're still depending on Transolar, and thank God Matthias Schuller is not here with us today. Do you feel the need to embrace that knowledge, because you're talking about thermodynamics and all these interactions, in your office, you doing your own simulations, you owning that knowledge. So perhaps my question is, do you still feel the need to include Trans-Solar in your process, or would you take the leap and saying, no, I don't need, because now I own this knowledge?
I did London without any climate engineers. I didn't know that existed back then, I think. I would not say the word need. I mean, I could do without them, but I want to work with them also to prove my client that what I'm doing is verifiable. If I would say, these are my schemes and this is what I do, they'll be like, yeah, of course. I mean, of course, you're not going to contradict yourself. So the fact that we have Trans-Solar making their hard-to-read graphs, I mean, you need some time to understand where is perceived temperature. I mean, I can explain to you. So these graphs are made by an independent office that has their own name, that they're not going to do what we want them to do. So it's more that. And when I present this to the city of Paris, I cannot come up with my own schemes. That doesn't. I mean, that's not reliable. So I think they're needed as a for that reason, and also of course because we do iterations and they do that better than we do. I think we work with many specialists because we cannot know. I mean, as a landscape architect, we have to work in so many fields. So it's always a great pleasure to like Arla to work with hydrologists that really came up with the whole scheme based on our intentions. But in that sense, I think they have their. I mean, we could, and Trans-Solar, they were so graceful to us that for my students they gave their software for free during the course. So it's great for them to understand how it works. We could have that in the office, but I would still need them as a kind of external verification.
Ron?
Thanks, Bas. Great talk. One of the things that I like in listening to you is I get a little lost in who you are. In other words, you're a landscape architect. Sometimes you're invested in technology. Sometimes you're invested in public space. Sometimes you look at history, sometimes, etc., culture, lots of things, climate, science, etc. You're a kind of free-range chicken when it comes to the discipline, so to speak. You're moving around. I think this is really terrific and quite important. And I wonder if you might comment on that relative to two undertakings. One of them, we're in a school, has to do with teaching, what that might mean. And the other is practicing, what that might mean in the world, facing the world with that kind of position that you, I think, happily occupy.
Well, the reason to devote time to teaching is the seriousness of the problem. I think the moment I applied to become professor in practice is that I understood with the office we can make projects and we can make it doesn't make the difference. I mean, it doesn't do anything to climate change except for showing how things could be done differently. So it's a kind of an example. But I thought and I hope that through teaching, to not only teach students a new way of thinking, but also to reach a broader audience, to maybe start a kind of a new way of doing things. That was my hope for teaching. So and as Gary pointed out, I push my projects to climate. But my clients are not all interested in that. So teaching allows you to choose your own subject and to push it much further. Like now we're treating the whole of Manhattan. Nobody's ever asked me or paid me to think about Manhattan. So teaching allows that. But I'm not answering your question.
No, not at all. Let me try again. I take responsibility for that. So my observation has to do with the fact that you move around among disciplines so easily and so productively. And how would that in particular, in fact, you kind of went the other way. You said you could specialize in the school. So maybe you did answer my question. I just didn't like your answer. But I'm intrigued by the sophistication with which you can move around like that and how one approaches the acquisition of understanding as a student or a colleague in the faculty, approaching that particular vantage point versus or then in addition to how one practices that way. So it's the assembly of disciplines that I'm interested in.
Oh yeah, but that I bring to the school. We started our trip to New York at the Swiss Institute with a talk by Steffi the head curator of the institute, because I wanted to start with art as a way of looking at reality differently. So Daniel is part of our of the studio. Daniel Kielman is the Transolar person. So we're bringing that to the studio. But what I mean is the studio allows you to choose your subject, but we're doing it exactly the same way that we do projects in the office. And it's hard to respond to this, but the thing is, yeah, I'm driven by my curiosity. You know, there's so many things are so interesting. So I think even in the life is so short to learn about things that are interesting. So I think Philippe Parreno was maybe the biggest influence in my life. I worked with him early on, and he would say you have to do everything once, like this idea of specializing and then only building hospitals. He said that's so boring. I mean, yes, you get better, but the excitement of doing something for the first time and not knowing how to do it and feeling uncertain, that's such a precious moment. So we try to do everything once. It's not very efficient, but it's always exciting.
Thank you.
Isabel?
Hi, thank you so much. That was a really incredible talk. I wanted to ask a question about your process of representation, because I assume in these microclimatic projects, it's really important to communicate a sense of atmosphere and how it feels on the ground. And I'm in my second year of the landscape program here, and I think in the field largely, and also in our curriculum, we really emphasize the rendered view or kind of photographic view to get down to the human scale. And I think with these kind of ephemeral climate experiences, there's a tension between artistic and scientific representation. You can show data and you can show charts, and it's very precise. And then you can also you can also show something more aesthetic or illustrative that sort of gives a sense of atmosphere. But I suppose what I really want to ask is how you approach the idea of making drawings that find a balance between this qualitative and quantitative system, because creating a photorealistic image of a landscape kind of traps it in time. And it seems like a lot of your work is about projecting into the near future and into a new climate reality in addition to designing for the now. And so how do you think about representing the way these landscapes function both logistically and socially, but also respecting the living nature of these landscapes and the way that they'll change as our climate changes and as our planet changes?
Thank you for a long question. No, it's a good one. It's a good one. If I could choose, I would never make a perspective, ever. I don't like showing what things would look like, because you can only be disappointed. It's like reading in a guide about a restaurant and then checking if it's true. I mean, there's no point. So for example, London, the only thing we made was a little isometric view with the France West and the cat, and that was enough for the client to trust us. So if I could, I would only make isometric views, explaining the process, but not explaining what it would look like. Of course, you cannot win a competition with that. So I showed you the images of Notre Dame, but that's the only CGIs I showed of the whole presentation. And all the other projects we did not make CGIs, not for La Défense, not for Himara, not for... So it's double, because of course people want to know what it looks like, and but it's not interesting. I mean, it reduces the project to an image, and the project is not an image, and also especially not in landscape. It's different in summer, it's different in winter, it's different 10 years from now. So that image is it's a necessary thing, but the moment it's built, we never show the images. And today is, these perspective guys are so good that you don't see the difference. If it looks real, then why build it? You've already seen it. There's no surprise.
But it is inescapable in the public realm work. People need to see it, and they need to see it early. But I want to qualify Isabel's statement. We used to privilege the photographic rendering. We don't anymore.
But it's difficult. Huh?
Yeah. In practice, there's no escaping it. Yeah. We have time for another question. Yeah, there's one up there. Austin.
Hi, Bas. I had a question regarding your earlier statement, every leaf matters. So I think in your presentation and in your work, you can clearly see how your landscapes are producing this perceived temperature that is for the benefit of people. I guess I'm wondering, thinking just in architecture, like the most sustainable way to build is to not build at all. So I guess I'm wondering if you or your firm have done like a carbon analysis of how much carbon does it cost to build this landscape, in terms of materials, production, people, and then how much carbon do your landscapes, so these trees kind of sequester, and if you, have a target of like, oh, after 5 years, it'll sequester all the carbon that we kind of made in construction, or if that's something that you and your firm kind of have not really touched on yet.
No, a very good question. We have just started that. We've just started that, and we're counting from 2007 how many trees we've planted, how because it is a very good question. Because in the end, if the answer is that we should not do anything, all of us together now, that would be so depressing, right?
No, I appreciate Austin's question. Also, we're beginning next year to have this in the curriculum, carbon calculation, carbon use intensity, carbon sequestration, carbon drawdown, and to make that a part of the toolkit that we use in studio. We'll be doing that because it's urgent, as you indicated, and I think we share the point of view that every action counts. We make choices, and I think every leaf counts is a pretty good metaphor. Thank you.